Mrs. Peters here, and I'm doing a demo on blending and shading in Prismacolor Colored Pencils. I'm doing two demo artworks here. One is the set of apples, and the next is a set of pears. One of the first things I need to look at when I'm doing photorealistic work is my source material. You'll notice that I used artwork, so photographs from unsplash.com, which is free to use. I suggest for advanced students that you probably want to take your own reference photos. But on my reference photo here, I was looking for really dramatic lighting and some nice variation in the colors of the apple. In this one, I was looking for the reflected light here in my pears, okay? So that's what I was really looking for in my reference photos. Also, if you do use artwork or reference photos from a free-to-use source, you definitely want to still credit them when you display your artwork. The first step of actually creating your artwork is to do a really light pencil layout. I like to use you can use a 2B. I think I do in my examples here. I think I do use a 2B. But you can also use a B or an HB or even a 2H to make sure that your graphite doesn't smudge into your Prismacolor and ruin your highlights. Don't shade before you go in, okay? Never shade in graphite before you go in with Prisma because you'll really, really smudge up your highlights. Here's how I swatched before I did my apples. And you can really see the Crimson Lake is the one that I used for my apples, the red that I used. But I ended up using Carmine and Poppy Red for my pears. So you really want to see how these colors are going to mix and how they're going to work on your surface before you go in on the actual piece. And I'm going to apologize now for the angle of this time lapse. Unfortunately, it gets a little bit cut off on the side. But you can see here I swatched for my apples after I laid them out, and I put in just a little bit of red, and then I go in and I preserve my highlights first. Preserve your highlights first. That's really critical to getting good shading in Prisma. So you want to go in, and the first place that you really bear down, and you do have to bear down pretty hard on Prismacolor. If you do a really, really light application, it's not going to give you that nice, smooth, waxy surface that that you get with photorealism in Prisma. So you want to really bear down, especially, I would say, on the third level. So you lay in lightly your lights, you lay in lightly your darks, you lay in lightly your medium tone, and then you're going to really push it. So you bear down very hard with your lights, you bear down very hard with your darks, and you bear down very hard with your medium tones. And once you have that nice glossy surface, that's when you can start coming in with more detailed layers. So you're going to go in, so that's 2 layers already, right? Before we even get to here, right? So lightly, light, darks, medium tone. Hard, press down hard, light, darks, medium tone. And finally, detail. So I refine and push my lights, darks, and medium tones. I've done 3 different layers just there, okay? And here you can see again some of my final touches for the apples. So again, laying in basic colors lightly, lights and darks, preserving my lights and pressing in on them hardest first, then finally going over them with some medium tones. And then I'm going to come over to my other apples and see how I'm adding in more detail. There's almost an unlimited number of layers that you can do on Prisma. That's one of the beauties of it. So I don't think I get what I would consider photorealistic artwork out of Prisma until I'm at least 3 to 4 layers in. And then I can go, I probably do 8 layers easily on a piece that I really spend time on. And you can really see that in the time lapse. And there they are. So, there they are. Okay, so that's the finished apples. So let's take a look at swatching, drawing and swatching for the pears. So I lay it out first in my pencil. And again, I'm going lightly, just doing a contour line drawing, I'm not shading. Then I went in with highlights, and that was it. Okay, I just preserved my highlights first. Then I came in and I swatched. What I'm doing here when I'm swatching, see that big patch over on the side? I'm actually looking at my reference, and I'm seeing the color combinations that I'm going to need to do on the pears. And I'm practicing that on my swatching first, before I go in on the pears. So now I've laid things in very lightly. I've laid things in very lightly, and now I'm going to start bearing down. Remember that you bear down hard on your highlights first. I'm also really working hard on my reflected light. So if I went in on this side with a lot of brown first, it would dull my colors and flatten it immediately. So I need to go in with oranges and reds in that reflected light. So really pay attention. What other colors besides, okay, yes, the pear is yellow, but what other colors do I see in that reflected light? I see orange, I see red, I see green coming into some of those shadows. I see blue, I see some browns, yes, in the shadow, but mainly focus in on those really bright jewel tones that are actually in there. Preserve those first. Go in with those first. You can always go over something and dull it down with a brown or a black if you have to. I don't recommend black. I actually would switch to a blue. It's easy to dull down, but it's really hard to punch up your color once you've done that. So you want to go light to dark. My AP professor or teacher in high school, he always said, light to dark, light to dark. And he was absolutely right. You have to preserve your highlights if you're going to get some really bright brights. And you can actually see me go in with some lighter yellows in there and pull them out. So you can go lighter. If you accidentally go a little bit too dark, you can pull some light in there, but it's harder. Okay, it's going to take more layers. It's going to take more fighting, much harder pressing down with the Prisma. So you really want to preserve your highlights first. A word about backgrounds. So you don't want to forget your cast shadows. One of the major mistakes I see my advanced students make is ignoring their cast shadows. You're on a surface. Make sure that you preserve the cast shadows on your surface. That said, even when I'm working with photorealism, I often will leave some of my background not completely blended. So I'm not bearing down quite as hard on that red at the bottom as I did on the pears. The pears probably have, 7 or 8 layers easily in any given section. And you can see me going over and over the same section again and again to push those shadows with brown, with blue, okay? With the reds, I use 2 different reds so that I do blend pretty smoothly right close to the pears. But once I come out from them, towards the edges of the paper, I barely touch the paper. And in the shadows, I just barely have I just barely touch the paper there. Just such a light indication that this is part of the same surface as this is back here. Okay, and there's the finished pears. I hope you enjoyed my demo on Prismacolor Colored Pencils. I hope that you'll go out and try your own Prismacolor still life.